Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another segment of Youth Perspectives. Today we have a new guest with us, Amina. Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
I'm good, walaikum assalam.
And Gazina, assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Walaikum assalam.
And today we're going to be covering a topic that is relevant not just to the youth but to everyone actually. And that is a topic of parents. Because in Islam, the rights of parents are so many and parents are so valued in our religion. And we're just going to discuss the cultural and societal and religious viewpoints on parenthood and the rights of parents. So we're just going to dive right in and we're going to ask, Amina, personally, why do you think parents are so important and why do you think they deserve so much respect?
I mean, children obtain all their morals and their values from the people they grow up around. And so the people that they grow up around are the ones who influence them the most, and they're the ones who they learn everything from. And so since parents have such a big responsibility, it's only right that we give back to them and that we honor what they've done to make us who we are.
Mm-hmm, and definitely. Gazina, what about you? What are your views on parents?
I feel like, of course, we can't really relate to the difficulties they've gone through, but to this point, where you are today, your parents have brought you up in a sort of shell, right? The pain they've gone through, the troubles, the struggles to, as Amina said, raise you how you are today, you can't ever relate to. But when people around you in the Quran and everyone tells you to respect your parents, it's for a reason, because of how much they've sacrificed for you to get to the point you are at today.
Yeah, definitely. Our parents have done so much for us, and that's one of the main reasons why, they deserve so much respect. And personally, that's why I believe that as well. Now we're going to move on to the Islamic perspective, which is somewhat similar, but Amina, specifically in the point of view of Islam, why does Islam place so much value?
I mean, Islam, first and foremost, it always places importance on your elders and the people who help you become who you are. And
why do you think that in Islam there's so many reasons that there's so many hadith and stories that say that respecting parents is so important, so you understand why, right? Exactly, it's because they've done so much for us. Definitely. Gazina, what about you, from an Islamic perspective?
I think that at first I couldn't relate to the restrictions. I thought of it as restrictions of what you can't do towards your parents. Don't raise your voice, don't express any displeasure, those sort of things. But now I understand that it creates a sort of guideline for behavior, right? Because in other cultures, when you don't have rulings or certain guidelines placed by the religion itself that tell you how you need to behave with your elders and specifically your parents, you can sort of start to go off and disrespect them and not feel anything, maybe because morally you don't think you're doing wrong, right? But I think that religiously, the guidelines that have been set for us and how we need to obey our parents, listen to what they say, not disrespect them, not express any discontent, no matter what they do to you, if they're even if you think they're oppressing you. But I think it's very important because later on you start to realize why that was in place and why you have to respect them, and you will genuinely start to respect them if you don't already. But I think it's super important to maintain our sort of the right behavior in our community.
Yeah, definitely. And she made a good point that we can never really truly understand what our parents went through until we're parents ourselves. We can never really put ourselves in their shoes because they've done so much for us, and we can't even imagine caring for someone or loving someone as much as our parents love us. So that's a good point. And Islam, time and time again, really kind of acknowledges that, because if Islam didn't, then that would just kind of devalue parents. But parents are so important, and the fact that Islam mentions them so many times is just an indicator that we have to respect them, we have to obey them and listen to them. And there's even hadith, even if your parents are not just towards you, you still have to respect them. So that just places so much value. And actually I'm going to bring up some hadith as well, because a lot of people think that, only Shias or Muslims are deserving of respect. But parents are so important that even if your parents are kafirs, you have to respect them. So I'm actually going to mention a hadith. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam said that Allah has not given superiority to a mu'min in 3 circumstances. First, to return what has been entrusted to you for safekeeping, whether it belongs to a mu'min or a kafir. Second, fulfilling an oath, whether given to a mu'min or a kafir. Third, doing good to parents, whether they be a woman or a kafir. So this means that regardless of what your parents believe, whether or not you agree with what they believe but with what they believe, you still have to respect them, even if they're kafirs. So in Islam, so many times, kafirs are just, not like people who we usually respect, but in the terms of parenthood, they're so valuable and they're actually equal like compared to a Muslim. So that just gives you perspective. So if your parents are kafir or non-Muslim and you have to respect them this much, imagine how much you have to respect them if they are Shia, if they are Muslim. So that just kind of puts things into perspective. Also, I want to mention another hadith. It's actually about someone came and asked Imam Raza that one of his parents was Muslim, but they weren't Shia. So the man was asking, what should I do? And then the Imam Raza replied that if they are dead, pray for them and give sadaqah on their behalf. If they are alive, keep them happy. And then also Jabir ibn Abdullah reports that someone asked Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam that my parents are against the truth, meaning they are not the Shia of Ahlul Bayt. And the Imam replied that be good towards them like you would be towards our Shias. So literally this hadith compares these parents to Shias, which just kind of highlights the fact that parents deserve respect regardless of their beliefs. So moving on, Amina, what would you do like if you didn't have parents? Because they do so much for us. Like imagine you didn't have parents to raise you.
That's true. You see that so many children that don't have their parents, it's more difficult for them to like succeed in life because they don't have that guidance role filled in their life. And I think that if I didn't have parents, it would be very hard for me to get to where I am right now. Even though I'm only in high school, I think it'd still be very hard to keep up with academics and like still find like a motivation for life and find inspiration for what I do every day.
Definitely. What about you, Gazina?
I feel like I can't even imagine it, because even though I may feel like, I can be independent, I can raise myself, it's okay if my parents aren't there, at the end of the day that's not true, right? Because in order for me to be able to think that or envision a future where my parents aren't there like guiding me or advising me even, I'd have to ignore the fact that they've raised me my entire life, right? So me being able to stand here and like say all of this is because of everything they've done for me. And maybe now I'm at the point where I can make decisions myself, but that doesn't mean that we can ignore the influence that our parents have had in our lives, right? And like even Islamically, I remember I was at a session at one point, and the Maulana was actually talking about how families that don't have like maybe a mother figure or like a father in their household, the children are usually deficient in some manner, right? So there's some qualities that they're lacking. So like if they don't have a father, they tend to be they're more like afraid, and like they have these qualities in them that reflect the fact that there's something missing in their life, right? So our parents, like both our mother and father, have roles, and they contribute to our our life and like us in different manners.
Yeah, definitely. And like if you all are familiar with science and psychology, there's that whole nature versus nurture debate, which kind of questions what shapes our personality, what makes us become who we are. So nurture is one of the main reasons that we are who we are today. So our parents and whoever helps shape and develop our personality, they're so important when it comes to who we are as a person, when it comes to our identity, when it comes to our religious identity as well. So parents are just they're so influential in our lives, they're so involved in our lives that there is no way we cannot really be connected to them. So without parents, honestly, we would like in the animal kingdom, right? Some they just lay eggs and they leave, or they give birth and they
eat their kids.
Yeah, some animals actually eat their children. That's just crazy. With humans, it's so different because we are like nurturing people. We as a society, we long for social interactions, for social, deep, meaningful relationships, and Allah actually blesses us with providing that family structure where we're so close to our parents. Parents and children have such a unique relationship, and a relationship of respect and discipline. So that's really, really interesting. But moving on, let's talk a little bit about like the non-Islamic perspective, and how do you think, Amina, non-Muslims compare with us in treatment towards their parents?
I feel as though since Islam puts such a high standard on parents and respect, Muslims usually tend to have a higher standard for their parents. They have a higher level of appreciation and gratitude for them. I feel like especially in the Western culture, if the parents don't tend to agree with the children's beliefs or opinions, the children usually just shun them and they just leave them alone. And that's like the concept of rahma, which is basically just shunning your loved ones, which is actually haram. It doesn't correspond with Islam's beliefs in the first place. And so I feel like they're usually more distant and they have more trouble connecting because they don't usually understand the level of gratitude and appreciation and how much the parents have actually done for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Amina, what about you, Gazina? How do you think non-Muslims, treat their parents?
I feel like, sure, we can say that, non-Muslims treat them differently, and maybe they do, but I know in a lot of cases that people that are raised, again, by their parents in a, like, even I know a lot of Christians, right, who are raised with a very, like, traditional sort of upbringing, and their parents always, like, emphasize respect and, like, morality and things that were very important in influencing their child. So those children, like, I know so many of my friends who respect their parents, and I was always amazed because, there wasn't really that much influence from religion, and it was like intrinsic because of, like, their morality, right? But then the only problem is that your morality alone isn't enough to take you throughout life, right? There has to be a backbone to that, which in our case is always our religion, right? It reinforces our morals and our ethics and sort of crafts them too. But for others, sure, like, they have other, like, values and systems that, like, tell them or guide them to be more respectful towards their parents. I just think that we go the extra mile when we do that.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, like, I've noticed too that like, non-Muslims, depending on the culture, right, like, in lots of Asian cultures you see that parents are so respected, but in more, like, maybe Western cultures you see, especially now in this country in America, you see people, they kind of put their parents in nursing homes, or kids, they, like, move out when they're 18 for college, for valid reasons, but then they don't really connect with their parents as much. They don't really touch base with them. They almost shut them out of their lives. So that's something that really, from a young age, I never understood, right? Especially the concept of, like, nursing homes. Like, if your parents did so much for you, why would you, like, put them in another house? I never understood that concept, but it's very common here, and that's why I was like, I'm glad that Islam has different
especially if you have the capability to take care of them, then, why not?
Exactly, right? If you're just like, relaxing at home while your parents are somewhere else, they're old, they can barely walk, it's really, really sad. Because we even see those ads, right? Like, oh, if you fall down and you're alone, call for help. Because that means, like, a lot of the people are alone. They literally, if they fall down the stairs, they have no one to help them up. They're on the ground until someone comes and helps them up, like an emergency response person. So moving on to the youth specifically, do you think the youth today properly fulfill the rights of their parents?
I think that's hard to distinguish which you do and which you don't, because, like, I don't know, usually these days we tend to, like, only focus on the negative. So, like, we'll focus on the children who aren't, like, fulfilling them at all. They completely neglect them. And, like, you don't realize how many people actually are taking care of their parents and how many people actually are grateful. But, like, I do think that, like, more recently people have begun to become more, like, distant from their parents and, like, begun to think less of their needs over their own, and basically just not see the point of interacting with them once their use is kind of finished from their point of view.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, how, like, we should also pay attention to the positives, pay attention to the youth. That's right, because a lot of the times we don't really appreciate the people who are working hard behind the scenes, who are respecting their parents. So that's a good point. Gazina, what about you? What do you think the youth are doing right now?
I feel like, honestly, we all have different goals, right? So maybe it seems, even if we look at the seemingly the negative, not exactly, like, the whole other side of the spectrum where, like, certain youth are maybe leaving their parents and going off and living their own life and stuff, but maybe if we take a look at the youth that are maybe not giving as much attention, or if there are, normally kids are like, oh, I want to go and live at a dorm, I want to go out of state to do this, I want to pursue my education, I can't do that if I stay home. And it seems like, yes, my children are leaving me, they're going off, they don't care about me, or like, why can't they stay with me, and it seems very disrespectful. But I think you have to look from that person's perspective, right? So, like, a lot of the youth these days think that happiness and, like, satisfaction stem from financial stability, right? So going off and getting an education, even if it means leaving your parents and going elsewhere for a couple of years, may seem like it's worth it because you can pursue financial stability, right? So after you get a degree, maybe you can rest assured that like I can take care of my parents farther on, And so now that our culture and like a lot of like Western society has associated happiness and satisfaction with being financially stable, like having wealth, stuff like that. That's very like capitalistic, but it's expected, right? So like our goals also change. And with that, so does our behavior, our priorities. So if my priority is financial stability for my family so that I can take care of them, I may think that going away from like my family for a couple of years is okay, even if it means that within those years my family may be sad and they may like be upset that I left. But then for me, at the end,
I can take
it's
care
worth
of them.
it, right?
Yeah.
It's like the end is worth like the process that you go through. And I think a lot of youth, when they have different goals, or even if it's like, oh, I want to, whatever it is, whatever their goals are, if they think that it's worth it at the end and it's going to lead for happiness and satisfaction for their entire family, they may think that it's worth it to leave them or disrespect them. So our standards are very different now that we've transitioned into Western society. Everything is the communities, everything, environment, everything is so different, right? And because of that, I think that oftentimes generation wise, like parents, and there's miscommunication between parents and the youth, which is why it's so important to have that talk, like figure out what your priority is. Maybe your parents don't understand where you're coming from, but if you explain it more, go to like a farther length, they'll appreciate your mindset too, but then also try to advise you to do what is better for both, the best of both worlds.
That's a good, sorry, were you
I
saying
don't know.
Yeah, like that's a good point, how the generation gap is an issue, especially in this, for our generation, because we're like the first generation to be raised in a Western country. Our parents come from like years and years of like culture, rich culture, which doesn't always work, in this society. So there are so many times when opinions and interests clash, and it becomes harder to respect your parents. I believe our generation has the most trouble when it comes to really seeing eye to eye with our parents, and therefore it becomes easier for us to disobey them or to be disrespectful towards them. So that's just all the more reason for us to pay extra special attention and to make sure that we are understanding the Islamic rights and obligations, when it comes to us treating our parents correctly. So with this, going on to this whole topic about culture and society, how do you think that the cultural, Islamic, and like American viewpoint on parenthood kind of compares with each other?
Like culturally, in a sense, like I'm bicultural, which means while I have American culture, I also have my parents' culture, which is Pakistani. And like Pakistani culture, it like emphasizes really heavily on respect for your elders and giving back to them and taking care of them like all stages. That's why you see so many like joint family systems, because they're always there. Everyone's connected and everything. And in the Western society, you see people moving out and everything. And like even though a lot of families do care for each other, they do tend to move apart and like get distant. But I also think that socially, it also creates like rifts between the generations, which means that it becomes more difficult, like even economically, to like support each other. Yeah. And like in the future find like a balance between like life and like also like what you actually want to do, like money, which is mainly the criteria these days.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely, those are good points too. Just the fact that we have to really live with this like hybrid of cultures, and it becomes hard and overwhelming sometimes. So that's a good point. And this is the big one actually, because a lot of us we think, okay, so why should we respect our parents? What happens if we don't? So what are some detrimental effects of not treating our parents the right way?
I mean, it's mentioned even in the Quran in Surah Luqman that like not displeasing your family, displeasing your parents especially, it results in your life actually being affected. So basically, if your parents are not pleased with you, then life isn't going to go your way. You're going to have more hardships. There's a story in my family actually about one of my great uncles. After he was in the army, he was like rising up really quickly, very successful. And then one day he said something extremely rude to my grandmother. And she never got upset at him. She never said anything. But everyone knew she was upset. And then right after that, he never got a promotion again. He got all the worst station posts. He after that, he hadn't hit his like peak. And like everyone references that event, like show that it actually is real. It's not just a saying that people say. Your parents' like pleasure and how satisfied they are with you in life does affect how well you do as well.
That's really interesting. So like if you ever feel like you're not succeeding or you're at this like, pothole in your life, go and see how you treat your parents, reevaluate that, because there may be an issue that you didn't notice before, but it is affecting your life in so many ways. That's a very interesting story. I didn't know that. Because what about you? What do you think?
I think that like even structurally, if you look at how like the absence of your parents, right, in your family sort of changes the dynamics, right? So imagine that you left your parents and prioritize everything over it, right? And sure, your parents are upset, they're not content with where you are, and like they miss you, but you sort of just continue on with your life because distance and everything like makes you sort of forget, right? But then the thing is that later on, when you have your own children, you won't have like family, you won't have anyone to surround your kids with, right? And like I've talked to so many parents and so many people, and they were always told me that like I remember I talked to my teacher at some point too, and she really prioritized how like sure, like how Pakistani culture has a lot of like joint systems where like you have to live together, and maybe like in American and Western culture it's very like, oh, you got married and didn't have your own apartment, like you didn't have your own place, you weren't financially stable. It's like no. The thing is that living with or even living around a family and your parents and your husband's parents or whoever, whatever family there is, it's really good for not just you, but then later on when you do have your own family and you have your own kids, it's very nice to be surrounded by like grandmothers and your grandfathers and being raised knowing what family is, because you value those bonds more as compared to like a family where a mom got married, well, not a mom, but someone got married, right, and they got had children, etc., and then the children see everyone else around them having like extended family and cousins and grandparents, and they don't realize, right? And that destroys the family structure, because then if those children do not grow up seeing you value and respect your own parents, what are they going to do for you, right? So maybe you're not valuing your own parents, but even think selfishly and realize that later on that's going to come back, and the same thing you did to your family, like your family's gonna do it to you too, because they don't realize, like you don't realize unless you've experienced it and know what like family bonds are and everything.
Yeah, so that comes to like the main question: what can we do to start treating our parents better? Amina, let's start with you.
It starts with really just reevaluating what they do for you and just like taking a minute and just seeing how much they actually do, and then if you appreciate them, do you tell them in the smallest things like thank you? Like when they wake you up, do you ever say thank you for that? Like do you ever wake up not grouchy and like say like one more minute, like that simple kind of stuff? And like think about like how much do you actually put into like repaying them? Because like say even if you carried your mother on your back for like years, you wouldn't pick up even 1% of what they actually like put for you. Or it just goes to show that like even the smallest things for appreciation, they really like show how much we can actually do for them, but it also shows how much we can actually understand how much they appreciate us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Gazina, what about you?
I think that apart from like reevaluating yourself and everything, I think we need to look into how much we look at other families, right? So how often do you look at other parents and like the relationship between your friend and their mom and dad, or like other families, and compare yourself, right? Because you don't know what happens there. Like I remember so many times I would see like my friends and they would just be like, oh wait, so we were younger, right? And if we had any drama going on or anything, my friends would be like, yes, I went and told my mom. And I was like, how could you? Like you didn't know you would get in trouble. Like that shoe would probably like be thrown at you or something. Like I was just saying random stuff. Like it didn't happen to me, but I would always be like, how do you say that kind of like what your inner heart, like whatever you're feeling to your parents? Because to me when I was a child, I would always be like, no, my friends are my closest, As you grow older, you obviously like start to get closer and closer to whoever it is, whether it's your mom, your dad, or both. But I'd always compare myself and like be envious, But I didn't realize, like later on I realized that my very friends who would have like so much, like, they were so close to their parents would actually be like blatantly disrespecting them, talking back, and I'm like, how can you not appreciate what they do for you, right? You don't see it, others can see it, right? So you need to take a step back and look at your own like family dynamics and stop looking at others, right? So it can be any action. Like the other day I was like I don't know how to say this, it's gonna sound very childish, but
we won't judge you.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say anymore, but what I was trying to get at is that you see other parents doing simple things like taking part in whatever joy you have, doing activities with
supporting you in events.
Yeah, and you want that, right? And like at those times you start to appreciate your family and value them. It's like, wow, like I've gotten so far and never realized, right? But you have to realize that in order to get to whatever point you wish to, so if you see your friend with their parents and they're like, so close, you need to realize that there's first this barrier that can only be eliminated when you respect one another, and slowly like you get closer, right? So you trust them, they trust you, and then you start to build on it. And whatever you feel inside, like if you have any feelings, you're not agreeing with something your parents are telling you, communicate. Like go ahead and tell them. Like they're not your school teachers, they aren't gonna punish you for it. They'll try to understand, because at the end of the day, it's the better for both. Like they've done so much till today to raise you, why would they stop now? That would throw everything away in the trash, right? So they're gonna go to extra lengths to like empathize and sort of like fix things. So you both need to like communicate.
Yeah, that's a good point, that respect and communication and trust is so important to really build that meaningful relationship. So I think we'll just take a break and move on to just Bibi Fatima for a bit. And Amina, you said you have a story to share from her life.
Yeah, so one story that I really enjoy about Bibi Fatima's life is a story about how Prophet Muhammad like found out how important she was going to be, which is when he received the news that Surah Kauthar was being revealed, Surah 108. Which is when he was sitting with his companions, and they started making fun of him because he didn't have a male heir. They started calling him Abtar. And then Angel Jibreel came and he said, like, do not worry, this surah has come, you will have a daughter. And basically that the fact that Angel Jibreel came just to deliver that shows the importance of how, like, not only are women like equal to the men in that kind of standards, but also that Islam would continue on even though Prophet Muhammad did not have a male heir, which is what they were mocking him for. They said, you started this religion, no one's going to continue it now. It was proving the point that even though she was a woman, she would be able to help continue on Islam's message, and it's like the basic knowledge behind it.
Yeah, honestly, Bibi Fatima has so much value, and there's so many wonderful stories, so thank you for sharing that one. Gazina, would you like to say anything about, Bibi Fatima, what she means to you, maybe?
Honestly, I always used to, if it wasn't even Lady Fatima, right, I would think of her mother, and everyone would tell me, well, you talk about how, women don't have a position. Well, there was Lady Khadija. She was, a businesswoman, and she was out there. And I just try to, envision, what would it be like to be the daughter of someone who, in an era of, where everyone around you is so ignorant, and they, they can't, think or envision anything better than what they have, going out of the norm and, being a strong, independent woman. Lady Fatima from the start was raised by a set of, individuals who were so, they were so great on their own. Combined, you can't even imagine. We talk about the importance of, raising children and how parents have contributed. Well, Lady Fatima had such a good foundation that you can't be surprised, looking at her or thinking that, look at the importance of her, because that an angel came down to the Prophet to alert him. Yeah, right, because what both parents did to after that to value her presence and raise her to where she is today, of course she's one of the greatest for a woman in the world.
Yeah, definitely. And just the fact that a lot of people, they think that Islam is a misogynistic religion, and the fact that Islam places so much value on Bibi Fatima, though she's the daughter of the Prophet, she is a woman, just proves that women have such a high status in Islam, and that they honestly deserve so much more than what a lot of cultures give them in today's day and age. So Bibi Fatima is just such a wonderful role model for all of us. And Gazina made a wonderful point how just think of where Bibi Fatima is coming from, right? Bibi Fatima Salaamullah Alaiha, she had the best of mothers. Her daughter Bibi Zainab was just so strong. We've heard stories all throughout Muharram and Safar about the courage that Bibi Zainab portrayed through Karbala and beyond. So just to know that Bibi Fatima was in between these really great women just proves how great she is herself. Just the fact that she was the daughter of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the wife of Bibi Fatima. Bibi Fatima was the wife of Imam Ali alayhi salam. She was the mother of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, right? The chiefs of the youth of paradise. So just she is in this position where everyone she is close to, everyone she loves, everyone who's in her family, they're so important. And that just in itself is enough to tell you that her status was so high. And then I don't even have to go and explain all her wonderful qualities, her characteristics, the stories from her life, the hadith, the things that she said, which we can discuss in later sessions as well, because just talking about Bibi Fatima will take like you can just keep talking about her and never stop, because there are books upon books that were written about her and her life, and she's just the greatest role model. So if any of you just want to learn more about her, just go and just open a book, read more about her, and you will be so inspired by the things that she did, the things that she said, the way she was. And she was a beautiful, great role model, not just for youth, not just for women, but for men as well, for all Muslims, for all of humanity. And that's something that we see with the Ahlul Bayt, that they have some qualities and characteristics that make them role models for all of humanity, whether they be man, woman, child, Muslim, Shia, non-Shia, non-Muslim, even if they're like kafir or atheist. Really, if you look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, you can find hundreds of things that you can apply to your own life. And that's just something that I found so beautiful, that the Ahlul Bayt are people that we can look up to. And Bibi Fatima is so important to me because she's one of the women in the Ahlul Bayt who, one of the women in Islam who, she's so respected, and I really find that inspiring. She's just a great role model for me and for everyone, honestly. So now we're going to move back a little and talk again about parents, because it's such an extensive topic. And now we're going to dive into the more Islamic perspective. So Gazina and Amina, they mentioned such great things about the cultural aspects, the societal aspects, the social aspects, the aspects in America, how culture treats them. They mentioned how usually in today's day and age, parents are almost like a liability, if you think about it. In American culture, right, parents are a liability. The moment you turn 18, you want to just move out, you want to get out of the house. Even students, children who aren't really moving out for college, if they're not going to a different city, even if they're in the same city, they still just want to move out. They'll rent an apartment with their friends, right? Because they have this culture where being with your friends and being with people your age is more important than being with the people who loved and cared for you more than anything. So I've noticed that a lot of people, they just move out, even if they're in the same city, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So if you want to leave, if you want to just be independent yourself, that's fine. I'm not saying anything against that. Islam doesn't say it's against the rules to do anything like that. But it's just that if you do feel like you need to move out, or if you get married and move out, or if you have a job elsewhere, right, there are many reasons. So if you do find yourself in a position where you leave your parents, because it will happen, right? A lot of people, they get married, they move away, or even if you're not married, just for school, if you leave, or even if you just want to leave. If you do that, just make sure that you never make them feel disrespected. You never make them feel unhappy. You never displease them. You never disrespect them, and you always fulfill their rights. And you maintain your connections with them. You call them often and ask them how are they doing. Visit them. If you're in the same city, right, invite them over, visit them often. Buy them presents whenever you travel. We're gonna mention some things about that too. When you travel, you should bring your parents gifts back home. So there's so many ways that you really should value and treat your parents correctly, even if you don't live with them. So don't think living with your parents is the only way you can give them a happy life. There are so many ways. There are so many people who don't live with their parents. Obviously, when you get married, you move out, you start your own family, right, with your spouse and your children. So for that time, your parents aren't really with you. And then maybe when they're older, if there's a line of siblings with one of them, maybe the parents will stay. So don't think that living with them is the only way you can fulfill their rights. If you do live with them right now, then you have more opportunities to do so. But if you don't live with them, there's still so many ways you can respect them. And we will mention that as well. We will mention how to treat parents, if you live with them, if they're Muslim or non-Muslim. Also, people whose parents have passed away. We'll address that as well, because if your parents are gone and you God forbid, didn't treat them right, what do you do? So I'll address that as well. But just mentioning just the Islamic perspective now, how are we supposed to treat our parents? And just starting off, this is a very, very, very extensive topic, honestly. There's so many books, and this is going to take a while to discuss, and I can't possibly do that in the short time that we have. But just starting off, I'm going to mention a verse in the Holy Quran, chapter 17, verse 23. It says, "The Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, and that you be kind to parents." So that's really interesting because in this verse, the rights of your parents are put immediately after the rights of Allah, which shows the status of your parents in Islam, right? Like immediately Allah mentions himself and how you should treat Allah, like you have to worship him. And then suddenly Allah just in the same verse, he doesn't even divide it by different verses. In the same exact verse he mentions, and you should be kind to your parents. So worshiping Allah and kindness to parents just comes one after the other, and that's just a really, really interesting point. For those of you who like dive into like tafsir, things like that, you can like find out there's so many different hidden meanings behind why parents are constantly mentioned, close to the rights of Allah. Whenever Allah mentions something like treat like you have to worship Allah, you have to fulfill your rights towards, well, Allah doesn't have rights, but as in you have to treat Allah in a certain way by worshiping him, obeying him, doing whatever to become closer to him. After that, you'll see somewhere that usually parents are also mentioned. So that's something that I really, really found interesting. Also, there is another verse of the Quran that I would like to mention. This is chapter 31, verses 14 to 15, and this also talks about parents. And the verses say, "And we have enjoined on man to be good to his parents. In travail upon travail his mother bore him, and in 2 years was his weaning. Hear the command, show gratitude to me and to your parents." When Allah says me, he's talking about his own self. Show gratitude to me and to your parents. To me is your final goal. So again, you see that Allah is mentioning, to show gratitude to him, and then again, immediately after he's mentioning our parents. Show gratitude to Allah and your parents in the same exact verse. And then second verse, "But if they, your parents, strive to make you join in worship with me things of which you have no knowledge, do not obey them. Yet bear them company in this life with justice and consideration, and follow the way of those who turn to me in love. In the end, the return of you all is to me, and I will tell you the truth and meaning of all that you did." So this verse is saying that even if your parents are not Muslim, and I mentioned this before, right? If they're not Muslim, if they're not Shia, or if they're just Kafir, anything, right? If they're not Shia, you still have to respect them. Even if they're unjust towards you, you have to respect them. You have to care about their happiness, because regardless of what they believe, the fact that they took care of you, the fact that they loved you and raised you, they didn't care if they had food or not, if they had shelter or not. They've always put you before their own self for like years and years. So imagine that dedication and that love and commitment parents have towards their children. I can never truly comprehend the intensity of parenthood, the love that they have, and just what it means to be a parent. We can never comprehend that until we are parents ourselves. So until then, like, you have to respect your parents. And I'm going to mention some more things as well about just the treatment towards parents, because like I said, there's just so many things. So here I'm going to mention one story right here. So there's one hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, "If one of your parents or both of them were old, impatient, and weak, so much so that it bothers you, do not say the least thing to them. Do not raise your voice even if they hit you. Speak with them kindly, using only noble words. If they hit you again, just tell them, may God forgive both of you." So this is speaking that even if your parents are unjust towards you, if they're doing things, you still have to respect them because of all the things that they did. Also, there's another tradition regarding parents' rights. So this is regarding parents that have passed away. So, obviously, I'm sure people who are watching, maybe some of your parents are no longer with us. They've moved on to the next life. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam addresses this, and he says, "What prevents you from treating your parents kindly, whether they are living or have passed away?" One asked the Imam what he should do for his parents who have passed away. And he replied, "Pray, give charity, go on the Hajj pilgrimage, and fast on their behalf." So Islam is so beautiful because even if you pass away, but you have people who love you and care for you, they can actually do good deeds for your behalf, and they can actually send good deeds to you on the other side. So now, even if you've passed away and you no longer have that control over having good deeds or racking up on sins, you can't do any of those things because your time has elapsed. the people of this world, in this life, they can still do things to really benefit you. So if your parents have passed away, read Quran for them, right? Like if someone passes away, we all do that, right? We all read the Quran for them, pray namaz for them, fast for them, go on Hajj with the niyat of having the blessings reach them. And never think that just because you're doing something with the niyat of having blessings reach someone else, don't think that means that you won't get the blessings. Obviously you will for doing it, but then on top of the blessings you get, Allah will also give them the blessings. So that's two birds with one stone. So that's really, really beautiful. So if your parents pass away, definitely, there's never an end to what you can do for them. Also, here's another one about parents who have passed away. A young fellow, this is in Bahar al-Anwar. So a young fellow served his parents well during their lifetime. However, his parents willed that he should repay a loan they could not. He refused to do so and did not even ask God to forgive them. For this reason, God ordered that he be registered as one who was damned by his parents. Another child, who was damned by his parents during his lifetime, paid back their debts after they passed away and sought God's forgiveness for them and was registered amongst those who treat their parents well. So it's really, really important that you have to treat your parents well, even if they passed away. Their khaza namazes, khaza rozas, if they have any, kafar or any debts to pay, you have to do that because it's just so, so, so important. I'll just keep mentioning some more hadith because honestly, these hadiths are more important than my opinion, and you know that these are authentic hadith. The seventh Imam ﷺ said that a man asked the Prophet to explain the rights of the father. He said, "Do not call him by his name. Do not walk ahead of him. Do not sit down before he does. And do not swear at him." The sixth Imam said, looking meanly at parents causes damnation. So even just looking at your parents in the wrong way is not allowed. So I'm going to mention something that Imam Sajjad said, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, regarding the rights of your mother. Note the following regarding your mother. She carried you for nearly 9 months in her womb. No one else could do so. She dedicated her love to you. No one else would do so. She protected you with all her existence, fed you and was hungry herself, gave you things to drink, and she remained thirsty herself. She clothed you and did not care for her own clothing. She felt hot but protected you from heat. She stayed up to care for you at night and protected you in all circumstances, so that she may have a child like you. You cannot be grateful enough for all she did unless God helps you. So this is saying that no matter how much you're trying to be grateful to your mother, you can never really truly just gauge how much she did for you. You can never really let that sink in because you can never comprehend it. So that's something that you really have to pay attention to, that your parents are deserving of so much, your mother especially. And then I'll just keep continuing some hadith. For example, here's one, that servants to parents is better than jihad. And there's this one story where this one man wanted to go, and do jihad, and he went to the Prophet and said, "I want to, but my parents, they're in need of me, they're elderly, they want my help." So the Prophet actually said, if that is so, stay behind, meaning don't do jihad and serve your parents. By Allah, in whose hands is my life, to serve parents for a day and night is equal to a year of jihad. So just serving your parents for one day and night is equal to a whole year of jihad. And that's just so interesting. And I actually didn't even know that. So if you think that being, the best Shia means going out and putting your life out there, not necessarily. If you respect your parents, then you have the best in both worlds. Also, I'm just going to mention lastly to wrap up, because we are short on time and I have so much. I plan to say so much and I'm actually kind of rushed right now because, there's so many things. Inshallah, we can continue the next session on this topic because there's so much. But just to end, I'll just end off by kind of mentioning what are the punishments in Islam if you don't respect your parents correctly, right? So if you disrespect your parents, what's the catch? Why should we care, right? So the Holy Prophet said, "Beware, abstain from angering the parents. The fragrance of paradise is perceived even at a distance of 1,000 years, but those who are disobedient to parents and those who cut off ties with relatives will not be able to smell it." Also, the Holy Prophet said, "One who displeases the parents, it is as if he has displeased Allah. And one who angers both his parents, it is as if he has angered Allah." Also, the Holy Prophet said that Allah will not speak to 3 kinds of people on the day of Qiyamah. Neither will he have mercy upon them, nor will he purify their sins. There is for them a horrible punishment or chastisement. These three types of people are the believers in destiny, the drunkards, and those who disobeyed their parents. So believers in destiny, meaning that if you think that, everything is set in stone, not my actions nor my du'as will affect everything, will just whatever Allah meant for it to happen will happen no matter what, then that believing in destiny is really actually wrong, because you have to understand that doing dua and through your actions and your amal, you can actually change the course of your life. That's why Allah gave dua for us, that we have it in us to actually change the course of our life for the better or for the worse. Like Amina mentioned with her uncle, right? He was disrespectful, her great uncle was disrespectful towards his mother, and we saw that in his professional career, he would never succeeded after that. So there's so many more hadith, but I think I'm going to end here because of time. And just remember that respecting your parents can make or break your life. And there's so many stations, right, of our existence, this life, and when you die, and in the grave, in the barzakh, in the day of judgment, and then in heaven and hell, right? In all these stations of your life, your parents, how you treat your parents affects, how good or bad your situation is in each of these stations. And I actually had hadith and stories to actually refer to each and every single one of these stations. But inshallah, maybe next time we can definitely cover those. Maybe in a few sessions from now, we could discuss this as well, because parents are so important, and I feel that as a society, we really don't give enough importance to that, and that's why I felt like it was something that we should definitely address. So just to close off, just remember that no matter who your parents are or what religion they follow, you have to respect them, and you have to understand that they will always put you before their own self, and they've done so much for you. And if you feel like you didn't respect them enough, now's the perfect time to make that change and to really, really start respecting them, whether you live with them or you don't. And if your parents have already passed away, you can still do so many things for them. Pray for them, fast for them, go to Hajj for them, take care of their loans for their debts, their khaza namazes and their fasts. You can do so much for them, and just always pray for the best of your parents and for those who you love, and always remember that your parents have always been there for you, and you should definitely give them the respect that they deserve, because Islam time and time again refers to that, and that means it is very, very important. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this session of Youth Perspectives, and inshallah we will see you next time. Jazakallah.